James, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Steve. Good to have you here.
We live in interesting times. You know, it's such a strange hobby that most people are completely unaware of high-end audio or any kind of
My friends
audio
think I'm nuts.
Yeah, well, that's so typical, right? And that is so typical. So the opening really question is, why you? What made you so special?
Well, I don't know if I'm special, but I mean, you know, thinking about it, like going back, I'm a little bit of a toy king.
Okay.
And like I've always enjoyed mechanical stuff, things that like have a purpose, things that move, whatever. So like I love cars. I love to have like the sharpest knife, you know, like
Okay.
I cook a lot. Like it just anything with a purpose, like I love to be like at the bleeding edge of technology.
Okay.
And you know, I started, I guess, when I was like a little kid. You know, my mom gave me a stereo and a Bonnie Raitt CD, I think when I was maybe 8 or 9 years old.
Whoa, that's young.
And I remember when I was in high school, I bought a little Harman Kardon stereo receiver with some money that I made working over the summer, and some JBLs and a JBL subwoofer. Because, you know, that was back in the days of Outcast and whatever, and we had to be able to really crank it up.
Right.
And then, you know, I kind of put it all away, right? Moved around, college, all that kind of stuff. And I came at some point to an apartment where I had room for a stereo, and my dad had given me and my brother a set of his old Klipsch Forte 2s. And when we were growing up, he had that and Adcom stuff. And we thought that was like just the coolest ever, because you could crank it up and it would play really loud, right? So I dug that out of storage, put it in my house, and like the disease set hold super aggressively from there on out. You know, I bought a Rogue integrated, you know, tube amp to drive those guys with. I ended up getting Martin Logans. I've had Magnepans, you know, Golden Ears, Wilsons, you know, you name it. I was on this like merry-go-round of speakers trying to find something that I liked. And eventually I ended up finding these little speakers called Harbeths, right? And I didn't know what they were. I just was at a buddy of mine's dealer on a job that I was working at in Pittsburgh, played me these speakers, and I was just like, wow, this is something, man. This is like sitting in the room with this singer.
Which Harbeth?
They were the 30.1s.
Okay.
I ended up buying a pair of 30.2s. And I had those for quite a while. I went through a bunch of different electronics. I ended up settling on Luxman because it sounds great with Harbeths, but it also just looks beautiful. Like on the integrateds, they have these meters that are like this big, and you just kind of watch it, and it's just, you know, it's fun. But I guess to go back to the, you know, the original question, right? Like, how did I get into this and why me? I also love music. Like, I grew up playing the piano. I grew up singing. I was in musicals. I was in the choir. So I've always liked music. And I guess I could hear the difference between like a Bose system and a really good system. And, you know, unfortunately for me in my retirement account. But, you know, to me, it's really important to be able to put on a record at night. You know, I have a little baby now, and I've been listening to records with her. And to have it sound like the musicians are with me in the room. And it's, you know, sometimes my wife joins me. She likes it. Sometimes she doesn't. It's kind of a solitary hobby, right? I mean, like...
Yeah, it is.
You know, I think about it like, you know, you came here and obviously I wanted you to hear what this sounds like. And like, we did like the audiophile etiquette thing, right? Like
absolutely.
You immediately took the spot, which is like, you know, you're supposed to take. And I played you a song that I thought, you know, might be interesting.
Right.
Yeah. And, you know, that's kind of like where I've been, I guess, taking this audiophile stuff lately. Is I know, you know, you and I were talking about it. Like, what is it that I'm drawn to now? And it's like a lifelike sound, right? So, you know, I continued on like the speaker merry-go-round. At some point I decided the 30.2s didn't have enough like, you know,
I hear you.
oomph. And I bought some Focal Sopras, and they made my ears bleed. I don't know why I didn't hear that when I was demoing them, but, you know, these things happen. Then I traded them for the 40.2 Harbeths, which were fantastic, but they're they're really big for this room.
Yeah. That's what I
And
was thinking.
I listened near field, and my wife was just, after 6 months of them, she was like, James, like, you have to get something else, right? So I ended up buying these Piegas.
And what's the model of the Piega?
These are called Coax 711s, and
Yeah, take off the grill.
what's really cool about these is they have this coaxial kind of magneplanar driver and then a ribbon tweeter inside, and then they have 2 active woofers and 2 passives. So they played at 23 hertz, despite being, pretty compact. And, they're just gorgeous speakers in terms of how they sound.
And where are they made?
They're made in Switzerland.
Okay.
But, I put them in, and this is probably something that's common to a lot of people that are watching this. Like, it's a step up technically, but it was a step back in terms of me enjoying my music. I stopped listening to albums, and I started listening to songs. And that started to piss me off, because I'm like, I've got all this equipment, and I'm listening to equipment. I'm not listening to music anymore. And so I ended up finding through, a bunch of different demos, these Fleetwood Devilles. And I thought I hated horns. I thought they made your ears bleed. But this speaker, to me, sounds like Harbeth with dynamics. Like, it's warm, but it has an effortlessness about it that like just makes it sound more real. And I think that the imaging is good, and whatever, they're made out of wood, and they sound like they're made out of wood, right? But maybe the Piega measures better in terms of, like we were talking about, frequency response. Plays lower, and yada yada yada. But these things still play to 35 hertz, and that's plenty. I have a subwoofer. But they make music sound like music. And I've been listening to albums, both sides, right? Like, not listening to songs anymore. And like, it's with all the same equipment in the same room.
That's amazing.
Isn't it weird?
That's a great way of putting it, though. That you listen to songs on one and albums on the other. That's something. I like that.
It's kind of like, like foot tap. Like, you can't measure foot tapping.
Right.
One makes your foot tap, one doesn't. But like, that's really important because like that kind of signifies that you're like getting into it, and you're enjoying the music. And like, to me, that's like what this is all about. At the same time, like, I am a gearhead. Like, I enjoy messing around with gear. But I think that, speakers are the quickest way to really screw up your system and make you not enjoy it.
Well, these sound more different from each other than anything else.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
So do you think, is it, I'm asking a question, is it important to you, like, where the product is made and its history or its bona fides?
Well, it is. I mean, if you look at my equipment, I have an MSB DAC, which is made in California, right? I like the fact that it's made in California. But I have mostly Japanese equipment. I have a Luxman phono stage and a Luxman turntable and a Luxman headphone amp. And then I've got a Zanden integrated amp, which is a tube piece.
Right.
All Japanese.
And the horns, they're made?
So yeah, these horns, these Fleetwood sounds are made in a factory in Pennsylvania by this guy, Jonathan Weiss, who owns...
Oh, they're OMG. Is that
OMA.
OMA.
Oswald's Mill, yeah.
OMG
there.
Oh my God.
What was crazy, though, is listening to these in the showroom with the $500,000 like crazy horns that he has.
Yes, I know.
I mean, obviously those were like more and more of everything, but like the amount of that performance that he was able to bring to these things at like a somewhat sane price point is crazy to me. And there is something to me. I like the fact that like he's got woodworkers that are cutting wood in Pennsylvania and using solid wood. They're handmade. They're using professional drivers as opposed to hi-fi drivers. So you can play loud. These can play 115 dB apparently, which is, I mean, that will like make your ears bleed loud. So to me, the fact that you're using hardwood made in Pennsylvania and professional transducers, to me, says that the product is like an heirloom quality product that's going to last a long time.
Oh yeah.
And when you're dropping, sort of used car money on a set of speakers, like, it's kind of nice to have them made well. But equally, look, these Piegas are Swiss, right? They're handmade in Switzerland. They're gorgeous. Like, they're really beautifully made. And that's part of the reason that I bought them, because I just was like, wow, those are just badass, and they're going to look great. But there's something that they're missing that I think the Harbeths have and these Fleetwoods have, which is like it's the foot tapping. It's the like, I'm listening to the whole side of the album, right?
Yeah.
So I guess to answer your question, yes, it matters to me. Like, I'm not using Chinese electronics. Not that I have anything against them, but I think that it's important to have really high quality manufacturing in America and in Western Europe and other places that we might like to travel to or whatever, and not let the Chinese make every single thing that we have.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, I think audio is one of those things too, where like technology has obviously made it. There's been improvements due to technology, right? But I think it's more in terms of like making stuff cheaper. If you listen to old Western Electric stuff on horns, like, it is astoundingly good on the right setup. So I think you could safely say that we're not necessarily that far forward of where people were 80 years ago with respect to maybe some tube amplifiers and that kind of thing, because we're not necessarily making stuff that sounds that much better now. Digital, different story, right? But realistically, I don't care what kind of digital rig you have. I'm not going to like it as much as listening to analog and listening to vinyl, and that's 50, 60-year-old.
Right.
I it's more than 50, 60 years old, but realistically, that's how old the technology is.
Not that sense specifically.
But this is like not unique to stereos. I mean, this is like cars, there's the same thing, right? Like modern cars, like they're so fast. Getting a Tesla, it's so fast. But like, who cares? Go get in an 80s 911, and yeah, it's slower than a freaking Honda Accord from today, but like, it sounds good and it smells good and it feels good when you drive it. And like, that's the point, right? Like, I'm not here to like measure well. I'm here to enjoy my music. And maybe the tannoys measure well, maybe they don't, but you liked them, and that's old technology. It doesn't, the newer stuff doesn't necessarily have to be better.
Right.
Yeah, I'd love to put together like a vintage set at some point when I have space for some big horns. I think that would be really cool. I don't know. I mean, I think, kind of like coming back to today, one of the things that like I've really enjoyed, and I don't know, you've definitely seen this probably hundreds of times, but like when I get a friend to come over and they know nothing about high-end audio, and I sit them down and I put on, a record that they like. It doesn't happen all the time. Some people don't get it, which is fine. But most people are like, that sounds like these people are right here playing for me. This is like unbelievable. And I would say 50% of those people that I've done that to ask me to help them put together a system.
Really? That's unusual to have that high percentage. That's amazing.
Well, I mean, I do something for them that's not, you get a pair of Magnepan LRSs and, a Rogue Audio integrated and call it a day. And it's not that that's like the be all and end all of like the Toy King audiophile world, but compared with what you can get for that kind of money elsewhere, that is some good equipment, right?
Yeah,
and,
that's great.
And people like it,
Thank you. Thank you for doing that. It doesn't happen often enough that the people who hear a great system take that next step and do it.
The hard part is getting people into vinyl. But you know what? I guess I don't need more people digging through crates than there already are and competing with me for good vinyl, so maybe I should keep that to myself. I used to be maybe more of like, I only like listening to vinyl, but I kind of came to the conclusion that it doesn't really matter whether it's digital or analog as long as you're enjoying what you're listening to. And like, some things sound better on digital and some things sound better on analog. And I guess I'm sort of like platform agnostic. Sometimes I like to just sit in my chair and play with my Rune and listen to music for a few hours and not get up every 15 minutes to, change a 33, or every 7 minutes to change one of these double 45s. But also, like, pop, electronic music. Like a lot of that stuff's not available on vinyl, or if it is, the pressings are just awful. And there's no point, right?
Yeah. Anything else we should cover?
Well, I mean, I think, we were talking about like the sort of progression of equipment that I've gone through, and like I don't care to bore people with like the specific models, like that doesn't really matter. Let's just say that like I've been through a lot of equipment. There has been Audio Research, Macintosh, Rogue Audio, Luxman, Wilson, Magnepan, like I mean, just every brand that you can think of, I have gone through. And I think that there's like a disease in this where like we just obsess about like making an improvement, and like I don't know, I mean, you sold stereo stuff for a long time, right? Like I have friends that work in different and own different hi-fi stores, and they need that insanity to stay in business to some degree, maybe because that sells equipment. But I find that like most of the time making a big change ends up being it can be a step back a lot of the time. Like I think it's really worth finding somebody that, yeah, you're going to pay retail, but like you can try it out in your house for 2 or 3 weeks, and they're not going to give you a hard time when you say, you know what, I want to try something else. Because like it's so annoying to buy stuff and then get it home and listen to it and go, I just don't like this, right?
And costly, yes, that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think, I come from retail, but I think what you're asking for, I hate to put it this way, but when you're qualified, which means like you're an actual customer, not someone just kicking tires, right? And when you're a buyer and you say to a store, I like this, but I really need to spend some time with it at home. Can we arrange for that? Yes, that seems like a reasonable request, as opposed to someone who's just, kicking tires. So. But yeah, if you're an actual, real paying customer, I think that's a very reasonable expectation.
Well, but I mean, the other thing too is that like some of this stuff is just, I mean, it's outrageously expensive. Like you get into some of these cables and things that are like, a car for a loom of cable. And like, I mean, if it makes you feel better and sleep well at night, like, and you have the money for it, like fair enough. But, I think like maintaining some balance as to like how your resources are allocated in terms of your system, like makes a big difference. Like it doesn't make a lot of sense to have a $20,000 pair of speakers with a $500 amplifier, right? Like it's not a balanced system. But, in terms of the like merry-go-round, sometimes a change that sounds good in the store or even at home can mess everything else up in the system. And then like I find that I end up having to redo the entire system to like accommodate a new component that I've gotten, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah.
But like the amount of like brain damage that's involved in like picking all of that equipment and like listening to it and installing it and schlepping it and selling it, and like, because I mean, I generally have to go through 2 or 3 pieces to find something that I like with whatever my speakers at the time happen to be, right? So I think my advice to somebody that's maybe getting into this, and I don't have 40 years like you do in this, but I feel like you've got to work from the speakers back. I think you've got to find speakers that like you'll love, right? Like I'm loving these Fleetwoods. And I think my system sounds really good with them, so I don't think I need to make changes per se. But when one starts with the speakers and then works back to the amp and back to the DAC and the turntable and the phono stage, I think you're able to make like a more cohesive system. And then like once you've gotten there, I don't know, man, like take a chill pill, like get another hobby, like go on vacation, like do something else, because you change the speakers and like the brain damage starts all over again. And like, I don't know. I mean, I like hearing new things and experiencing new things, but at a certain point, like it kind of makes your day bad when you put on a system and you're like, man, I screwed this up because I bought these speakers and I don't like the way it sounds,
Yeah. No, I actually did a video about exactly
Oh,
that,
really?
about figure out which speakers is going to work, and then work back from the speakers. Because when I get emails from people saying, well, I have this amplifier, what should I get? Well, it's like, well, now that you've locked in with the amplifier, now you have to find a speaker that works with the amp as opposed to the other way around.
And that you like.
And that you like, right? So it's you get to the final destination faster if you figure out the speaker. Now, of course, if you're just starting out, that's not so easy. But once you have some years of experience and you kind of understand this stuff a bit, yes, settling on a speaker and then saying, now that I got this locked in, I'm going to get the amp that's going to be the right amp for this. Not the best. I hate when people used to say, what's the best? I said, I don't know what best is. I know what different people like different things. You have to find the speaker that works for you and then work back from there. It's not even so much getting there. It is the journey aspect of it, of learning along the way. What's going to work for you. That's all that matters, really.
Yeah, and we're all nuts. I mean,
We're all perfect. Yes, we're all. Well, we all want what we want, and getting there is not so simple. You know, it takes some education, whatever.
But one of the things that I notice though with my wife is like after I make a change in the system, she can hear it. There have been so many times when I've made changes and she's like, yeah, that sounds worse than it did before, right? But she doesn't even need to like listen for that long. Like she can hear it in a passing, and it's crazy to me that she can hear that well, and she's usually right.
Because she's not invested, right?
Yeah.
She can just say it.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I get it. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, the other thing that I don't know if you've made video on or whatever, but it'd be interesting to think about is what is up with this like audiophile shaming? Like, why do people use audiophile in like a negative connotation? Like, yes, I enjoy playing around with different gear, and like part of this hobby is more than listening to music. It is about gear. Some of it is about gear. I get it. Like that is what it like. But why is that bad? Why do people think that that's bad? Like, oh, you don't like music. You're just doing it for the gear.
Yeah, because they're the subtext is they're saying you don't really care about the music. It's just about the gear. And I said, well, there's a what would you call it? A range there. Some audiophiles are all about the gear, and some audiophiles are almost exclusively about the music, right? They just buy lots of records. They have a crappy hi-fi, right? But I said that most people are somewhere in the middle of that spectrum, and whether they're a guy with a $100,000 hi-fi that has 3 albums or something, if it gives them pleasure, good. Why does it bother you that he doesn't meet your standards of being it's all about the music, The very first thing I ever wrote was called Are We Not Audiophiles? You know this group called Deville?
No, I don't.
No, anyway, there was this band called Deville, and their first hit song was called Are We Not Men, We Are Deville. So I did a thing like, Are We Not Audiophiles? Because I was at a party once, and there was 40 people in the room, and a lot of them were audiophiles. And I walked up to each one. I just said, are you an audiophile? And a lot of them said, oh, no, I just like music. And one guy had a $50,000 or $60,000 turntable. When he said, oh, no, I just like music. I said, David, you don't need to own a $50,000 turntable to play records. So I'm kind of thinking it's crazy that you're denying that you're an audiophile. And he's like, well, it's just this guilt that I think other people put on them because they don't get it. Like you said, a lot of your friends don't get it, right? A lot of people don't get it. Why do you have all this expensive stuff? And well, they're just not. It's not an interest of them to.
Well, gear people are even just understanding that like there is a notable gain to be made from higher quality equipment in terms of fidelity, right? Like. A beautiful Leica with a beautiful lens is just going to take a better picture than a $200 point and shoot. Like,
right.
It's the same thing with a, $200 turntable versus a $20,000 turntable.
Yeah.
Like, it's a big difference.
Oh yeah, it's a type. It's a type of person that's drawn to audio / music. Anyway, thank you, James. This is fun.
Thanks for coming. It's great to have somebody in the house in the weird days of the COVID,
Oh yes. Well, I think we're passing the middle part at least.
Yeah.
think so. Anyway, thanks again for your time. This was a lot of fun. And to everybody out there, thanks guys for watching. And I really do hope to see you back here again soon. And James, I think our paths will cross.
Thank you. Good to see you, Steve.
Bye.